The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the golden fields of Maple Grove Farm. Just then, a roar shattered the tranquil evening air. A sleek, black motorcycle skidded to a stop just beyond the rusty old gate. The rider, clad in black leather and a menacing scowl, looked out over the land as though he were admiring a prize. But to Donny Turner, the farmer who had poured his heart and soul into that land for the last 20 years, it felt like an omen, a storm gathering on the horizon. Donny wiped the sweat from his brow, his calloused hands gripping the wooden handle of his pitchfork. The world could see his faith in the land, and he intended to protect it fiercely. Maple Grove wasn't just a piece of earth, it was his legacy. His grandfather had tilled that soil, his father had nurtured it, and now it was his turn. But fate had other ideas, and that motorcycle was the first sign. Across the field, behind the glistening tree line, more bikes emerged, 6, then 8, engines revving with a primal growl. The motor gang had come to Maple Grove, and their intentions were clear. They weren't here for a friendly visit, they aimed to take what they believed was theirs. Rumor had it they wanted to use the land for drug running, a makeshift base for illegal operations, a far cry from the honest farming Donny embodied. The gang members were notorious, their reputation cloaked in fear. With their tattoos and gravelly voices, they instilled dread in the heart of the toughest city dwellers. Were they really going to terrorize his small corner of the world? Donny felt his heartbeat quicken, each pulse echoing the urgency of the moment. He knew what he stood to lose. He took a deep breath, the earthy smell of the farm filling his lungs, trying to muster courage. He turned and strode toward the wooden barn, its walls worn and weathered, much like himself. Inside, rows of tools glinted under the fading light, each one a token of hard work, dedication, and love for the land. Those words rang in his ears like a battle cry. Just as he swung open the heavy barn door, the grating sound of metal clashing against metal filled the air. Donny peered through a crack in the door and saw the gang's leader, a hulking figure named Rex, commanding his crew. They laughed raucously, revving their bikes, flaunting their bravado as if they owned the place. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, an instinct to strike back igniting within him. But how? He was just one man against a group of hardened criminals. Confronting them directly was madness, yet if he didn't stand firm, they'd take not just the land, but also the hope and aspiration it harbored. Donny took a moment. The way forward lay not in the bearing of fists, but in the strength of the land he loved. He decided to confront them. With resolve coursing through him, he walked out of the barn, the pitchfork resting on his shoulder like a soldier's rifle. He was ready to face them. It was now or never, and he wouldn't let fear rule him. Donny's voice rang out, strong and clear, cutting through the noise. The laughter faded, eyes turning to him sharp and curious like wolves spotting prey. "This is my land." Rex turned slowly, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He taunted, stepping off his bike, glaring at Donny with an arrogance that could only be born from a life of intimidation. The other gang members chuckled, their excitement turning into a buzz of anticipation. They relished the idea of an easy fight, the prospect of showcasing their power against a lone farmer. Donny's heart raced as he faced them, but he locked eyes with Rex, refusing to back down. "I'll fight for my land," he declared. "I've shed blood, sweat, and tears here. You think you can come in and take what's mine?" The gang went silent, and for a heartbeat, the tension stretched like a rubber band taut and ready to snap. Donny felt a flicker of pride within himself. Each hour he spent working the fields, cultivating crops, and caring for the animals flashed in his mind. It gave him strength. Rex's eyes narrowed, contemplating Donny's fire. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." He motioned to his gang, and they laughed again. Arrogance cloaked their intentions like a second skin, but they hadn't accounted for Donny's will to protect what was rightfully his. In the following days, the tension escalated. Donny kept a watchful eye on his land. He could feel the weight of their presence like an ominous storm cloud. They'd ride by, blaring their engines, taunting him. But what they didn't know was that Donny wasn't just a farmer. He was connected to the land like roots to the soil, inextricably intertwined. He had something they didn't: love and determination. He set up a defense, gathering whatever supplies he could find. The barn quickly transformed into a makeshift fortress. There, he stored tools and organized supplies, preparing for the inevitable clash. Each night after the sun dipped below the horizon, he strategized, laying out plans and visualizing the confrontation that loomed ahead. One late afternoon, as the crimson sun dipped below the hills, Donny saw the gang approach again. Their bikes rolled into view, dark against the glow of twilight, with Rex at the helm. Donny stood at the gate, a pillar of vigilance, his pitchfork in hand. It was the moment he had been dreading, and yet the moment he had been preparing for. Rex shouted as they approached, "This is useless, you know we'll take it." The other gang members revved their engines, their triumphant laughs punctuating the chilling threat in the air. Fear rushed through Donny, but fear only fueled his resolve. He tightened his grip on the pitchfork, feeling its familiar weight sink into his palms, reminding him of all he had sacrificed for this land. He yelled back, his voice steady and strong. "You don't belong here." Rex smirked, putting on a theatrical performance of mockery. "A home, those fields, you think those crops mean anything to us?" But as the words left Rex's mouth, something shifted in Donny's spirit. He realized the truth. It wasn't just about the fields or the crops. It was about everything. The relationships forged through years, the memories intertwined through generations. Without another word, he spun around and ran toward the barn. He grabbed a couple of bales of hay and began rolling them out. The gang members exchanged puzzled glances as Donny positioned the bales, creating a barrier across the open area. Instinct kicked in, the kind that came from years of hard work. One of them shouted, but Donny didn't care. He was further fortifying his ground. Soon it became clear. He was determined to create an obstacle, a barrier that would force them to confront him directly. Donny shouted from behind the makeshift barricade, "You think you can intimidate me?" For a second he saw doubt flicker in Rex's eyes, a blink of uncertainty that hinted at vulnerability. But then anger flared, fresh and hot. Rex charged forward, his gang following. Adrenaline flooded Donny's veins as he reached for his pitchfork. The first of the gang members leaped over the bales, only to be met with the hard thrust of the pitchfork. Donny wrestled, adrenaline propelling him forward as he fought off attackers with precision and raw determination. The clashes echoed like a primal symphony, the sound of struggle intertwining with the cries of those trying to invade his sanctuary. One by one, Donny pushed them back, taking every ounce of physical strength and mental courage he had. Each time he faced an opponent, he didn't just recall the sweat on his brow. He recalled his grandfather's legacy, the dreams buried within the soil, and all the children who had visited his farm innocence in their eyes. The scuffle felt surreal, echoing through time, a man fighting for his heritage, his identity, against darkness wanting to swallow it whole. The gang morphed into a chaotic swirl of leather and rage, but with every swing, Donny stood tall. And gradually, the tide shifted. The might of the motor gang diminished as they faltered under Donny's fierce resolve. He knew he wouldn't let them win. He couldn't afford to. As Rex lunged at him, fueled by frustration, Donny dodged and the gang leader stumbled, crashing into a boulder, sprawling awkwardly on the ground. Moments stretched, and in the stillness that followed, Rex's compulsive fury metamorphosed into bewilderment. This wasn't the showdown he had anticipated, the terrifying farmer nowhere near yielding. Donny took that moment bearing down on Rex with purpose. "You thought you could steamroll over everything I've built here. You judged me wrongly." Rex, breathing heavily, cast a glance toward his gang who stood watching in shock. The bravado quickened to a hiss, uncertainty creeping in like fog. One by one, they retreated, measuring the resolve shining in Donny's eyes. Just one man against a crew threatening an entire existence. Finally, in that fractured silence, Rex spat on the ground, the last display of defiance. "You got lucky this time, farmer." And with that, the motor gang retreated in shame, the roar of their engines trailing into the distance as dusk cloaked the land once more. Donny stood there, pitchfork in hand, heart racing and tears blurring his vision. The fight was not won easily, and the fear of their return gripped him. Yet that sunset marked a turning point. With every ounce of strength in him, he had fought for the life he cherished. The battle for Maple Grove Farm was just beginning. But in that moment, As the stars began to pierce the vast tapestry of night, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Hope filled his spirit like the fertile earth filled the roots of the crops he had grown, reminding him that sometimes, even against fearsome odds, the heart of one could stand tall against many. And as Donny prepared to defend his land yet again, he understood with clarity that when it came to fighting for what you love, you never back down. The air was thick with the smell of freshly turned soil, rich and earthy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over Maple Acres Farm. Just another peaceful afternoon, or so it seemed. But as the wind picked up, carrying with it a distant roar, an uneasy tension settled over the land. Harley-Davidson engines were rumbling closer, like thunder on the horizon. In the calm before the storm stood Tom Jacobs, his hands caked with dirt, a shovel resting at his side. He wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted into the distance. Motorcycles were rolling into view, thick black harbingers of chaos. Tom felt his stomach drop. The rumors had been swirling in town for weeks, but he had hoped they would dissipate. The motor gang wasn't just a local legend. They were a force, known for intimidation and violence. And now they were on his doorstep. He had inherited the farm from his father, who'd fought through tough seasons filled with drought and hardship. They had made it through together. This land wasn't just where he grew crops, it was his heritage. It held memories of laughter, hard work, and determination. As his heart raced, Tom felt a primal instinct rising within him, a burning urge to protect what was rightfully his. As the sound of engines revving filled his ears, he clutched the shovel tighter. The bikers, clad in leather and reckless arrogance, circled the property with menacing glee. Tom stood at the edge of his field, watching the gang spread out like wolves around a hunted deer. He felt small, but there was a fire inside him that couldn't be extinguished. "Look at that," one of the gang members jeered, pointing with a snicker. Tom took a deep breath, planting his feet firmly in the soil beneath him. "You're not welcome here," he shouted, his voice steady, even as uncertainty crept into his mind. "This is my home." Laughter erupted from the gang, an ugly, harsh sound that reverberated off the barn walls. Their leader, a hulking figure named Rex, sauntered forward, his swagger bordering on delusion. He bore a tattoo of a serpent coiling around a skull, a fitting emblem of danger and malice. "Home," Rex spat back, his tone dripping with disdain. "No one gives a damn about this place. You're wasting your time, old man." Tom felt a wave of fury wash over him. "You want this land." He raised the shovel as if it were a sword, refusing to back down even as adrenaline coursed through him. Rex let out a roaring laugh that sent a shiver down Tom's spine. "Brave little farmer, but you're outnumbered and outmatched." As the gang closed in, Tom's thoughts raced. He knew he couldn't call for help. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and even if he did, how long would it take? This was his fight, and he had to find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. With resolve strengthening in his chest, Tom dropped the shovel and sprinted toward the barn. Inside was more than just tools. It was a trove of memories and a fortress of his own making. He grabbed barrels of old paint and ropes, thinking quickly. He didn't need to outfight them, he just had to outsmart them. Back outside, he saw Rex leading a charge, confidence radiating from him like a cloak. Tom hurriedly rolled barrels of paint onto the ground, positioning them near the path the gang was racing down, strategically placing obstacles that would slow them down. He shouted, urgency lacing his voice. The gang hesitated, the sneers on their faces faltering for just a moment. Then they rushed forward, eager to confront the so-called farmer. It was a gamble, but he was ready. Tom ran back into the barn, his heart pounding. He gathered whatever he could find, old ropes, baling twine, and anything that could be used as a weapon. He stashed them behind a stack of hay bales, the first line of defense. The rumble of engines grew louder, bringing a fresh wave of fear. But determination quickly pushed it aside. He could hear the buzzing of laughter, the taunts ringing in his ears. Rex was leading them, and soon they would be upon him. Tom sensed the impending chaos, knowing he had to act fast. With a quick glance over his shoulder, he spotted them barreling down the lane. It was time. He dashed towards the entrance of the barn, adrenaline firing through his veins as he made his way to the makeshift barricade he had set up. As the first bike approached the barrels, Tom took a deep breath. Everything slowed, and in that moment he focused entirely on the task at hand. Just as the motorcycle hit the barrels, they toppled over, spraying paint in all directions. A splatter of bright blue and yellow exploded across the dusty ground, sending the bike skidding sideways. Chaos erupted. One member of the gang lost control and slammed into another, bringing down the gang like dominoes. The confusion only fueled Tom's resolve. He could turn this moment into an advantage by using their disarray against them. He shouted as he lunged forward, grabbing a rope from the stack behind him. He quickly maneuvered it into a lasso, aiming for the nearest bikers who were trying to regain their footing. He wrestled with the ropes, his hands moving as quickly as his heart raced. One biker, still on the ground, scowled up at him. He yelled, but Tom wasn't listening. Immediately, he aimed for the next biker, catching him off guard and tying him up before he could react. Rex belted out a frenzied order for his gang to rally. They scrambled to their feet, pushing through the aftermath of chaos, but there was fear now, unease lingering in their eyes. They hadn't expected to face such fierce resistance from the farmer they thought they could bully. Every time they advanced, Tom fought back harder. He ducked, rolled, and swung ropes, standing his ground amid the onslaught of leather and fury. He didn't just feel like a farmer, he felt like a warrior defending his kingdom. Rex charged at him with a rage-fueled growl, but Tom was ready. He sidestepped just as Rex stepped forward, and with the skill of years of hard labor, he tangled Rex's legs in the rope, bringing him crashing to the ground. Rex stumbled, the wind knocked out of him. The laughter of his gang faded into stunned silence. Rex gasped, trying to untangle himself. Tom stood tall, sweat dripping down his brow, his heart pounding like a war drum. "You think you can come here and take what's mine? You think fear rules this land? No." There was a moment, a heartbeat, where everything hung in the balance. The gang members surveyed one another, uncertainty finally breaking through their bravado. The chaos had shifted. The farmer was not the weak link they had thought him to be. One biker, visibly shaken, took a step back. "This isn't worth it, man," he said, pushing through the masses. Rex's face darkened, anger brewing, but he ultimately let out a huff of frustration. The sound rippled through the gang, and one by one the bikers began to reconsider their choices. Tom could sense the shift. Intimidation was no longer enough to keep them united. "Let's get out of here, Rex," another member chimed in, fear creeping into his voice. Tom took a step forward, clutching the rope tightly, his chest tight with exertion. He challenged, his voice a steady fierceness. "This is my land." There was silence, a potent, heavyweight silence, as the gang looked at each other. Fascination mixed with fear, confusion swirling in the minds of those who had placed their faith in Rex's machismo. Finally, exhaustion and doubt broke through. "We're leaving," Rex muttered, his bravado draining away like water from a cracked dam. With a nod from the others, they mounted their bikes, rolling away slowly, defeated. Tom watched as they rode off, the roar of engines fading into the distance. A surge of relief washed over him, mixing with the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He had defended his home, his heritage, with nothing but courage and grit. The sun began to set, bathing the fields in a warm glow. He stood there, breathless, grounded by the weight of what he had just faced. Every cycle of the sun down to the horizon reminded him why he took a stand. It wasn't just about the land, it was about love and legacy. As darkness fell, Tom knew the fight wasn't over. The motor gang might return. They had tasted defeat, and defeat could fuel a hot desire for vengeance. But in that moment, standing against the fading backdrop of daylight, he felt something he hadn't in a long time hoped. He had stood alone, yet somehow he felt more connected than ever to every seed he had planted, every crop he had nurtured. This was the essence of farming, not just to toil but to embody resilience, to persist against all odds. And he was reminded then, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, that sometimes the fiercest battles can only forge the strongest warriors. Tom Jacobs may have been a farmer, but in that moment he was also a guardian of dreams, a beacon of hope ready to defend what was rightfully his, come what may. And as he stood watching the stars emerge, he vowed to be ready for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. He would not just fight, he would prevail. A single crow cawed as it flew overhead, the only sound in the quiet afternoon air of Blue Sky Farm. Golden fields stretched endlessly under the brilliant sun, swaying gently in a breeze that carried the sweet scent of freshly tilled soil. Everything seemed perfect, until the peace shattered like glass. In the distance, the rhythmic growl of motorcycle engines pierced the stillness, growing louder, rumbling ominously as they approached. It was a sound that sent a chill down Harold Thompson's spine, jarring him from his serene thoughts. He'd heard the rumors in town whispers of a motor gang looking to seize land, wreaking havoc, and now those rumors were a harsh reality. Harold was no stranger to hard work. His hands were scarred and calloused from decades of plowing and planting, but he wore those scars with pride. This farm was his life, his legacy. It had been passed down from his grandfather, who had fought droughts, storms, and even a fire that nearly consumed it all. As the motorcycles rolled closer, Harold stood tall, heart pounding like a war drum. He squinted into the sun and spotted them at the edge of his property, their slick black bikes gleaming in the light. They were a chaotic cluster of leather jackets, inked skin, and swagger. The gang rolled right past the entrance gate, an unmistakable sign of aggression. Harold called out firmly, his voice carrying over the growing sound of revving engines. The gang's laughter echoed, venomous and mocking. "We like the view," shouted Rex, the gang leader, his arms crossed, a confident grin splitting his face. His skull tattoo glinted under the sun, a symbol of the chaos he thrived on. Harold demanded, retrieving a metal pitchfork from the nearby barn. It felt heavy in his hands. The tool meant for nurturing crops now felt like a weapon. Rex jumped down from his bike, strutting toward Harold. "What are you gonna do with that, old man?" The laughter from the gang cut through Harold like a knife, but he held his ground, heart racing. "This dirt is my life, you want it." He brandished the pitchfork, feeling a surge of defiance. "Bad move, farmer," Rex sneered, gesturing for his gang to spread out as they revved their engines. Seeing the gang move to encircle him, Harold's mind raced. He was just one man against a group forged in havoc and fear, known for taking what they wanted and leaving destruction in their wake. Yet he knew he had to act. This wasn't just about protecting land, it was about fighting for everything he cherished. He shouted, his voice firm as he pivoted, sprinting toward the barn. He needed to use the space he had to his advantage, quickly grabbing anything he could find. Old barrels, ropes, anything that could serve as a barrier or weapon. As he scrambled back outside, he saw Rex and a couple of gang members approaching. Tom's blood boiled, but he forced himself to think. He rolled one of the heavy barrels toward the makeshift barricade he was crafting. Then he faced the gang with determination. "Come on then, you want my land." His voice boomed, echoing against the barn walls. Rex laughed, his bravado returning. He lunged forward, but as he did, Harold swiftly rolled a barrel right into his path, sending Rex stumbling. The gang hesitated. Confusion rippled through them. Was this old farmer really willing to stand up against them? Rex bellowed, but Harold could see the uncertainty etched across their faces. He was holding the line, and he needed to keep that momentum. As the riders charged, Harold ducked into the barn once more. He grabbed loose hay bales and started stacking them, creating a makeshift barrier. Each bale felt like a shield, each one a step toward reclaiming his power. He shouted, leaning against the barrier he had formed. The bikers edged closer, brimming with the arrogance that came from endless victories. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, Harold unleashed a stream of hay bales from above. They cascaded down like a tide, knocking the first biker off balance and sending others scrambling. "That's right," Harold shouted, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and triumph. Rex, seeing his gang falter, unleashed a rageful roar. "You think a few bales are gonna stop us?" He lunged toward Harold, but Tom was ready. Gathering his strength, he pulled a rope and swung it expertly, catching Rex around the ankles and bringing him crashing down. The gang stepped back, hesitance blooming into fear. One of the bikers yelled, "What's happening?" With the realization dawning that things were not going as planned, the bikers began to retreat, glancing nervously at one another. They might have come in seeking dominance, but they found themselves rattled by the old farmer who fought with a fierceness that rivaled their own. Rex shouted, scrambling to his feet and trying to regain control. The gang returned to their engines, but doubt danced in their eyes. They were not prepared to face the unexpected, a man who knew his land as intimately as he knew himself. Harold took a deep breath, steadying himself. "You want to take my land?" He raised the pitchfork in defiance, letting the adrenaline course through him. With each passing moment, he felt a surge of strength. He was one man, yes, but he was a man fighting for his legacy, fighting for everything his family had built. Rex glared, frustration radiating off him. He spat, eyes narrow. Then, with one last roar from their engines, the gang peeled away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and uncertainty. Harold stood amidst the remnants of chaos, his heart still racing. He had done it, he had stood his ground, but shadows of fear still lingered. He knew they would return. No gang ever truly gave up. Over the coming days, the tension in the air thickened. Every creak of the old barn and rustle of the fields seemed amplified in his mind. They wouldn't just give up. They would be back, emboldened by their need for revenge. As night fell, Harold staked out defenses, positioning bales and building barriers. He felt an urgency clawing at his gut. This wasn't just about the fights he would face. It was about protecting his family's legacy, the farm that had nurtured generations before him. Sure enough, 3 days later, as dusk began to settle, the familiar rumble of engines echoed across the fields once more. This time there were more bikes, a show of force, a full row of monstrous machines driving towards him. Harold gripped the pitchfork tightly, feeling a mix of fear and determination wash over him. He thought about all his father had taught him, lessons of perseverance etched into his very being. The bikes encircled the barn as the gang dismounted. Rex stepped forward, confidence restored, eyes wild with anger. "Did you think we'd just forget about you? This time you won't be so lucky," he snarled. But as they advanced, Harold's heart thudded in his chest, but it was a drumbeat of courage. He stood in front of the barn, ready to protect the life he loved. "This is my home. Leave now and I won't call the police," he proclaimed, trying to find a spark of negotiation amid the chaos. Rex scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You think calling the cops will help you?" He motioned to his gang, and they advanced with a hostile energy. Harold shouted, "This isn't the way. You think taking this land makes you powerful, but it will never be yours." With that, Tom lunged at Rex, his pitchfork aimed with laser focus. A swift swing knocked Rex off balance, leaving him dazed. The gang hesitated, worry creeping into their expression. They hadn't expected actual resistance. Sensing their doubt, Harold seized the moment. He charged forward, pitching himself between Rex and the rest of the gang. He yelled, his voice cracking with passion. The clash was swift. The gang found themselves pushed back, stunned by the adrenaline of their own reluctance. For each step they took, Harold pushed harder. A barrage of hay bales turned into flying projectiles, shielding him from their overwhelming force. With seconds feeling like hours, the tide of battle shifted. The chaos they had come with turned into confusion. They weren't just here facing a pathetic farmer. They were tangled in the fervor, the very essence of what made a home worth fighting for. Rex shouted, the authority in his voice faltering. He backpedaled, pulling his gang with him, the laughter and bravado of the early confrontation fading into silence. As the bikers scrambled to recover, Harold felt a torrent of pride course through him. He had not only protected his land, he had reclaimed his spirit, standing unapologetically tall against the odds. The gang fled, breaking ranks, engines roaring away into the night, a chaotic retreat fading down the road. Breath coming in heavy gasps, Harold stood surveying the battlefield, the chaos taking shape before him. The sky above gleamed with stars, reflecting the sheer weight of what he had faced. In every corner of the fields, he held memories of laughter, of neighbors, of storms that tested him and his family through time. As he turned to walk back toward the barn, the weight of fear transformed into confidence. That night, he knew the battles weren't over. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with complexities he couldn't predict. But as long as he stood firmly rooted in his truth, he would fight and protect the land he loved. Harold Thompson wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a warrior of spirit, undaunted and fierce, determined to stand for every blade of grass and grain of wheat that had come to define his life. And as the night deepened, he held on to that resolve, ready to protect what was rightfully his, no matter the cost. The sun hovered low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over Thompson Farms, a patchwork of fields that had flourished for generations. It was a quiet afternoon, only the sound of a gentle breeze rustling through the corn stalks. But that peace shattered when the unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines broke through the tranquil air, jolting Jack Thompson into reality. He dropped the pitchfork he was using to tend to the field. His heart raced as he squinted down the dirt road. 3 black motorcycles rounded the corner, their engines growling like angry beasts. Jack had heard the stories, rumors about the motor gang who sought to expand their territory, and now they were heading straight to his farm. With sweat dripping down his brow, Jack braced himself. This land wasn't just his livelihood, it was his legacy. It was where his father had worked, where his mother had planted seeds of hope, and where he had grown up learning the value of hard work. There was a sense of urgency coursing through him, a primal instinct to protect what was rightfully his. As the gang approached, Jack could see the men clad in leather jackets, their faces concealed by dark helmets. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a mixture of fear and anger. The leader, a towering figure with a skull tattoo on his arm, raised a hand. The rest of the gang slowed their bikes, circling Jack like wolves closing in on prey. "Hey there, farmer," the leader called out, voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like you're all alone out here. How about you hand over this dump?" Jack's blood boiled. "This is my home. You have no right to be here." Laughter erupted from the gang, a harsh sound that scraped against Jack's resolve. The leader smirked. "Oh really? You think you can stop us?" "We'll see about that," Jack shot back, his heart pounding. He turned and ran toward the barn, adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He wasn't just going to roll over, he had to find a way to defend his land. Inside the barn, dust motes danced in the shafts of fading sunlight. Jack grabbed a handful of tools, his father's old pitchfork, a sturdy shovel, and some lengths of rope. Every item he returned with felt like a piece of his heritage, ready to be wielded to protect his home. Back outside, the gang was revving their engines, clearly amused by his bravado. Jack stood firm, determination crystallizing within him. He shouted, ready to face them head-on. With that, he hurled a shovel at the nearest bike, where it clattered harmlessly to the ground. But the act shocked the gang into silence, and for a moment they exchanged uncertain glances. It ignited a spark in Jack, a flicker of hope. But Rex, the gang leader, was not to be deterred. "You've made a grave mistake, farmer." He lunged forward, ripping the shovel from the ground and tossing it aside. Jack's instincts kicked in. He lunged at Rex, pitchfork in hand, aiming to defend his territory. The 2 men clashed, the sharp metal reflecting the sunlight as it whirled through the air. The rest of the gang erupted into chaos. Each biker rushed in, eager to join their leader. Jack fought back, swinging the pitchfork and dodging their advances. It was a wild dance of determination against sheer odds, a battle that should have been impossible. But Jack's heart thrummed with a fierce rhythm, echoing the spirit of every farmer who had fought to protect their land. In those moments of adrenaline, he remembered the struggles of his ancestors who had tilled this soil before him. He thought of the dinners shared around the table, the laughter and love that filled the farmhouse, and the dream that made it all worthwhile. Pushing back against the wave of bikers, Jack began using the tools at his disposal to create distance. He grabbed a length of rope, deftly managing to trip one of the riders as he lunged forward. The gang member stumbled and fell, the wind knocked out of him. Shouted fury blending with desperation. The bikers started to regroup, but Jack pressed the advantage. He rolled a barrel toward them like a cannonball, knocking another member off balance. With every burst of energy, he felt the tide shifting, fear turning into motivation. It was more than just fighting for the farm. It was fighting for everything that defined who he was. But Rex was relentless. He charged back into the fray, rage etched across his face. He swung a fist, narrowly missing Jack. For a split second, time slowed as Jack felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. And then, something clicked. Pushing through the chaos, Jack found himself dodging Rex's blows, weaving in and out like a dancer. For every swing thrown his way, Jack responded with raw determination and persistent stamina fueled by years of hard work. Rex's skills as a fighter began to falter, and the fear in his eyes started to show. Each dodge reconfirmed Jack's belief in himself. He was not just a farmer but a protector. Suddenly, in a surge of adrenaline, Jack lunged forward, managing to send Rex sprawling to the ground as he grabbed a barrel and rolled it toward him. Time seemed to halt, the air thick with uncertainty and anticipation. Jack could feel the shift the gang was hesitating. He shouted, voice stronger than before. Rex, still on the ground, seemed to realize the tide had turned. Confusion settled on the faces of the gang members, uncertainty creeping in. They had come threatening to take what was his, but it was becoming clear they had underestimated him. One of the bikers yelled back, "This isn't worth it, man." It was a pivotal moment. Jack could almost taste victory, knowing they might actually back down. The gang backed away, exchanging uncertain glances. And just like that, they mounted their bikes, engines rumbling beneath them as they prepared to leave. Rex turned back, rage still simmering but tempered with a hint of fear. "You haven't seen the last of us, farmer." And with that, they peeled away, kicking up dust as they disappeared down the road. Jack stood alone, catching his breath, heart still racing. The adrenaline slowly faded, but triumph soared within him. He had held his ground, fought back against the fearsome gang, and he hadn't just defended his land, he had reclaimed his spirit. Days passed, and Jack kept vigilant, constantly aware that the motor gang had only retreated, not given up. He had read enough stories to know that they would plot, lurking in the shadows, ready to strike again. His resolve only strengthened. Each morning, he would wake to the sounds of nature that had always soothed him, the birds chirping, the wind whispering through the trees. But now those sounds were entwined with a sense of urgency. He fortified the barn, stocked up on supplies, and turned his field into a fortress. Then one evening, while Jack was fixing his fence under the setting sun, he heard a familiar roar. It was the bikes again. They were back, brimming with even more anger and vengeance. Jack's heart dropped, adrenaline surging. This time he stood firm, not merely as a farmer protecting his land, but as a man ready to fight for everything he valued. The gang rolled into view, a larger group this time, a grim reminder of their strength. But Jack wasn't going to let fear consume him. He had been here before, and he knew this time he needed a plan. As Rex stepped forward again, sneering, Jack stood tall, using the pitchfork as a shield. "You think I'll back down?" He shouted, locking eyes with Rex. It was now or never. Rex thundered, signaling for his gang to advance. This was a confrontation meant to show power, but instead it was becoming a test of wills. As they charged, Jack felt fear pierce through him, not for himself, but for the life he had built, for the legacy he shared with his ancestors. He charged forward, fueled with the spirit of his heritage, the sacrifices made for this land, the love interwoven into every corner of the fields. The clash was chaotic. Jack swung the pitchfork, pushing back against the tide of leather and engines. Every movement felt a live one man against a storm, but Jack was fueled by the fire of determination. With each encounter, he fought smartly. He used the terrain, the very land he had worked, as a weapon. He tripped gang members with ropes, used barrels as shields, and clashed head-on with anyone who dared approach. As the battle escalated, Jack spotted Rex attempting to flank him. Timing his movements, he swung the pitchfork once more, knocking Rex off balance. For a moment, it felt as though the world had paused, the sun glinting off the metal, and then, a crash. Rex fell, and with him, he took several gang members who were caught off guard. There was a split second where shock replaced resistance on the faces of the bikers. They had underestimated him again. Jack capitalized on that moment. They were faltering. He repositioned himself, rallying the remnants of his strength, and pressed forward with renewed vigor. "Leave now," he roared, and in that instant, the relentless tide shifted in his favor. Gang members began retreating, glancing back at Rex, whose anger was palpable but futile. Their eyes betrayed them. The fear that had been buried beneath bravado was now rising to the surface. One of them shouted, mounting their bike and revving the engine loudly. With a rush of adrenaline, the gang began to scatter, abandoning their leader in the throes of defeat. Jack pressed on, undeterred, watching as one by one they fled, engines roaring into the air, dust clouds swirling behind them. When the last bike faded into the distance, Jack stood there, breathing heavily, a mix of exhaustion and triumph washing over him. He had fought not just for his farm, but for the legacy and love embedded in its very roots. In that moment, he understood what it meant to stand tall against the odds. His heart swelled with pride as he surveyed the land his land, and he knew he would do it all again if he had to. Under the vast sky, Jack Thompson had become not just a farmer, but a guardian of his own destiny. And as he wiped the sweat from his brow, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a man forged in challenges, ready to meet whatever came next, wherever that road might lead. The peaceful hum of the countryside was shattered by the sound of roaring motorcycle engines echoing across the farm. Dust kicked up in swirling clouds as three ominous figures on heavy bikes came into view, cutting through the serenity of Maple Valley. In a world where peace reigned, this was an unwelcome intrusion. Farmer Ben Harper paused, his hands stained with rich earth, and felt a chill creep up his spine. Ben had spent his whole life cultivating this land, pouring sweat and tears into every inch. The maple trees lining his property stood like sentinels, guardians of his family's legacy. Every seed he planted, every crop he harvested, was a testament to hard work and unwavering commitment. But now, this gang, a notorious group known for terrorizing small towns, threatened to uproot everything he held dear. He wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted at the approaching bikers. Each rev of their engines sent a wave of dread rolling through his stomach. The leader, a menacing man clad in black leather with a distinctive tattoo of a serpent wrapping around a skull, raised an arm in a mocking wave. It was Rex, the infamous leader of the motor gang, and behind him were his grinning accomplices, looking to push their weight around. Rex bellowed, his voice dripping with arrogance. "What's a guy like you doing out here all alone? This is prime territory for a little fun." Ben's resolve hardened. "This is my land," he shouted, heart pounding in his chest. It was a fleeting surge of courage. He knew he'd have to stand his ground, but the odds were skewed. 3 against 1. Ben felt the grim reality settle in. The laughter from the gang sliced through the air, an ugly sound that made his skin crawl. Rex sneered. "This isn't your playground anymore, old man." He motioned for the others to charge forward. Instinct kicked in. Ben felt a primal urge to protect his land, to defend what generations had held sacred. With a swift glance toward the barn, he bolted inside, adrenaline pumping. The barn, with its wooden beams and rusty tools, was a sanctuary filled with memories. It symbolized everything he had fought for. Facing the towering shelves inside, he quickly grabbed a sturdy pitchfork and a coiled rope. They felt heavy in his hands, but somehow they also felt empowering. "I'll make you regret stepping foot on my property," he thought, clenching his jaw. Emerging back into the sunlight, Ben stood his ground once more. The gang halted, surprised at his boldness. Ben shouted, raising the pitchfork. Rex raised an eyebrow, his smirk fading. He ordered, charging forward as the gang followed suit. Ben's heart raced as he faced the oncoming wave of leather and steel. He sidestepped Rex, thrusting the pitchfork toward him. The gang members shouted. Their laughter turned into chaotic shouts of surprise as they collided with each other, momentarily disoriented. Using that chaos to his advantage, Ben took a swift step back and swung the pitchfork, narrowly avoiding the gang leader's advance. But Rex was relentless, and he retaliated with an aggressive lunge. They clashed in a flurry of movement, metal against muscle. Rex taunted, circling around him. Ben's blood boiled. He shouted, channeling the anger that had been bubbling inside him. Channeling every hour of labor, every night spent worrying about the farm, he pushed back fiercely. The pitchfork met Rex's leather jacket with a clang, and Ben felt a surge of adrenaline flood his veins. The other gang members hesitated, unsure whether to jump into the fray. This wasn't the easy fight they had anticipated. In the chaos, one of the bikers lunged toward Ben, grabbing for the pitchfork. In that split second, Ben dropped it, rolling away as he grabbed a nearby shovel. He swung it with all his might, sending the biker stumbling back. "Get up," Ben shouted, his voice rising with intensity. He was filled with an unexpected confidence now. Shockwaves of disbelief washed over the gang as they realized this farmer wasn't going down without a fight. Rex, now fuming, beckoned his gang to regroup. "We can't let some farmer beat us." But with every swing of the shovel, every moment of pushing against the tide of chaos, Ben felt his confidence grow. He had worked too hard to let this gang walk all over him. Memories flashed before him, his father's laughter as they tilled the soil together, his mother's gentle guidance planting the first seeds. He was determined to honor their legacy. Ben caught one of the bikers off guard, landing a strike that made him stumble. In that moment, he felt the gang's unity fracture. Their bravado was fading, replaced by uncertainty. "Come on," Rex shouted, looking for any sign of surrender, but it only fueled Ben's fire. "Scare you?" "No," Ben called back, breathing heavily yet standing resolute. As the momentum shifted, some gang members glanced at Rex, doubt creeping in. They didn't come prepared for a fight to drag on this long. Ben took advantage of their hesitation once again. In a surge of determination, he swung the shovel with newfound ferocity, sending one rider tumbling into a pile of hay. The moment created a ripple effect. The remaining bikers began to retreat, fueled by confusion, looking to Rex for guidance. Their laughter faded, replaced with nervous glances. One of them muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Rex's face twisted in fury as he realized the tide was turning. "You cowards." He snarled, but the effect fell flat among the gang's ranks. Ben, sensing victory within his grasp, raised the shovel like a champion's trophy. "This is my land. You think you can just take it?" His words echoed with a fierce power that rattled them to their cores. Bit by bit, the gang began to back away, eyes wide with disbelief. They had come looking for an easy target and had found instead a man willing to fight tooth and nail for what he had built. Rex's bravado wavered as he glanced around at the retreating figures, his face contorting in anger. "Get back here," Rex shouted in frustration, but it was too late. The gang members climbed onto their bikes, uncertainty lingering in their expressions. One by one, they revved their engines, leaving one last glare at Ben. Rex spat as they pulled away, kicking up dust behind them. Ben stood amid the aftermath of chaos, breathless and panting. The once quiet farm felt electric with the thrill of victory mixed with the weight of reality. He had pushed back against the odds, fought for his legacy, and driven away the storm. As the dust settled, he took a moment to soak it all in. It wasn't just a battle won. It was a testament of strength, spirit, and heart. The fight had ignited a fire within him that he thought he had long buried. Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise, Ben found himself more vigilant. The motor gang had retreated, but their looming presence lingered over the fields like an uninvited shadow. Knowing they would likely return, he fortified the barn, stocked up supplies, and sought support from neighbors. And then, one somber evening, as twilight settled over the horizon, the sound of revving engines returned. A mixture of dread and resolve washed over him. He remembered the battle, the taste of victory, and prepared himself accordingly. They rolled back into view, this time a larger group, laden with the promise of revenge. Ben stepped outside, fists clenched. He wouldn't stand down again. The gang descended from their bikes, fury in their eyes. Rex stepped forward again, a darker shadow of the previous confrontation. "You think you can keep this up? We aren't messing around anymore," he snarled. Ben held his ground, heart racing but steadied by purpose. "You don't belong here." Rex laughed, but it was devoid of genuine amusement. "Let's see how brave you really are," he sneered. In that moment, something flickered in the air, a mix of fear and determination. Ben had fought before, and he would fight again, but this time he would bring all he had learned. Rex commanded, launching the gang toward Ben. As the first biker charged, Ben rolled into action, grabbing a nearby wooden crate and swinging it at them. Chaos erupted once more, a whirlwind of shouts and clashing sounds. Rex tried to press forward, but Ben stayed sharp, dodging punches and pushing back with a strength that felt almost supernatural. He was fighting for more than just land. He was fighting for a piece of his soul, the soul of generations who had toiled on this farm. He felt the resolve of his ancestors coursing through him, and in that moment weapons didn't matter. It was heart and grit that would carry him through. He shouted, rallying himself against the storm of leather and steel. The gang faltered again. Fear began to seep into their ranks, growing strong against their bravado. Rex roared, struggling with anger as he realized the power shifting once more. The moment created waves that rippled through the gang, and one by one, they began to peel away, engines roaring as they sped off into the distance. The fight left them, realizing they had misjudged the farmer once again. Breathless and battered, Ben stood tall amid the wreckage, adrenaline still coursing through him. A mixture of pride and exhaustion washed over him. He had proven himself, not just as a farmer but as a protector, a guardian of the land. As darkness settled, the stars began to twinkle overhead, a gentle reminder that light follows the dark. Ben took a moment to breathe, grateful for the peace he had fought hard to regain. In time, he healed. He set aside the turmoil of the battles fought, poured his energy into planting new seeds, and rebuilt the areas that had been damaged. The farm thrived again, reflecting resilience and renewal. Word spread through the town. The tale of farmer Ben Harper, the man who stood up against the odds and refused to back down, became legend. And in those stories told under the stars, hope thrived as brightly as the crops he nurtured. From that moment on, he didn't just tend to the land. He embraced his role as the protector of Maple Valley, a warrior who would stand his ground no matter the cost. Each sunrise brought new promise, and with it, a deepened understanding of what it meant to fight for what was yours. Ben Harper became the voice of resilience, a beacon of strength against all odds. The Motor Gang, they were just a chapter now, a reminder of the battles fought, but more importantly, of the spirit that rose from the soil. The heart of the farmer thrived boldly, knowing he was ready for whatever came next. The air was thick with the scent of fresh hay, and the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the sprawling expanse of green hollow farm. Everything seemed tranquil, until the distant sound of motorcycle engines began to disrupt the peaceful rhythm of the countryside. Gary Thompson, the farmer who had invested decades of hard work into this land, wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted into the horizon. 3 dark figures appeared, their black leather jackets glinting ominously in the sunlight as they approached on their roaring bikes. The infamous Iron Serpent's Motor Gang was notorious for their ruthlessness, and Gary felt his heart race. He had heard the stories, the tales of them terrorizing small communities, taking whatever they wanted by force. But this was different. This was his home, with memories flashing through his mind. The first time he had planted seeds with his father, the laughter of his children playing in the fields. A determination surged in Gary's chest. This wasn't just land. It was his legacy, his family's history woven into every inch of dirt. He wasn't about to let this gang walk in and take it from him. The engines roared to a halt and the gang dismounted, swaggering towards him with an alarming confidence. The leader, a burly man named Rex, stepped forward, his snake tattoo slithering down his arm like a threat in itself. "Well, well," Rex sneered, surveying the land as if he were the king of some barren kingdom. "What do we have here? Just a farmer and his little slice of the world." Gary's heart was pounding, but he stood his ground, shoulders squared. "This is my home." Laughter erupted from the gang, a sound that twisted like a knife in Gary's gut. "Oh, we can and we will. But hey, if you're feeling brave, we can do this the hard way," Rex replied, crossing his arms and leaning in, his eyes gleaming with menace. The weight of the threat hung heavy in the air, and for a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. What could one man do against a gang of hardened troublemakers? But that doubt was quickly replaced by a fiercer resolve. Gary thought of his parents, the sacrifices they had made so he could keep this land alive. The memories of every early morning spent tilling the soil rang in his ears. He couldn't back down, not now. He shouted, raising his fists defiantly. His voice echoed across the fields, a challenge that could not be ignored. The laughter stopped as Rex took a step back, clearly taken aback by Gary's unexpected courage. He mocked, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his tone. Gary shouted back, his adrenaline surging. With that, he turned and darted toward the nearby barn, adrenaline fueling his every step. If this fight was going to happen, he would need weapons, and he knew just where to find them. Inside the barn, the smell of aged wood and hay welcomed him like an old friend. Old tools hung on the walls, relics of a simpler time. His heart raced as he scanned the room for anything he could use. He grabbed a pitchfork, its wooden handle worn but sturdy, and a couple of large, rusted metal tools just in case. Emerging from the barn, he found the gang still conversing among themselves, clearly unsure of how to handle his defiance. Rex called out, amusement creeping back into his voice. Gary tightened his grip on the pitchfork, feeling its weight ease his racing heart. I might just do that. With that declaration, Rex waved his hand, signaling his gang to move in. As they charged, time seemed to slow. Gary felt a rush of adrenaline as he sidestepped the first biker, keeping his eyes locked on Rex, who was coming at him full force. He thrust the pitchfork forward, narrowly missing Rex but making contact with the approaching biker behind him. The man stumbled, clearly caught off guard, and the chaos erupted. In the midst of the fray, Gary swung the pitchfork again, his resolve powering each strike. He wasn't just fighting against the gang. He was fighting for the very essence of who he was, for his family, and for the dream that had been cultivated on this land for generations. Rex yelled, fury coloring his voice as he clashed with Gary, their bodies colliding like a storm. Gary dodged, spinning around as he swung the pitchfork overhead, pushing Rex back and surprising the other bikers with his skill. The fight raged on, and with each successful maneuver, Gary found an unexpectedly deep well of strength within himself. He was more than just a farmer, he was a defender of his home. But even so, the sheer numbers began to overwhelm him. Bikers swarmed from all directions, and in a split second, Gary found himself struggling to keep his footing. Just as the chaos seemed insurmountable, a glimmer of light flickered in his mind, a memory of his father teaching him how to use leverage in a fight. With a sudden burst of clarity, he turned the pitchfork sideways, using it as a barricade to ward off the incoming attacks. "You think you can intimidate me?" he shouted, rallying himself against the storm. Rex, now visibly frustrated, lunged again, but Gary was ready. In a deft motion, he dropped to one knee and swung the pitchfork, catching Rex off guard. The leader stumbled and the gang hesitated, doubt creeping into their ranks. One of the bikers muttered, clearly shaken by the turn of events. He looked back at Rex, who was wiping the sweat from his brow and gazing wide-eyed at Gary. "Stand your ground." Rex roared, but even his voice wavered now, the confidence slipping away. Gary seized the moment, his heart pounding like a war drum. "You came here to bully me, but you found a fight. You want this farm." A collective gasp rippled through the gang as they glanced at one another, their bravado deflating. When Rex saw that fear reflected in his gang's eyes, he grew desperate. "We'll come back," he snarled, but even as he said it, the fight in him faltered. As the gang began to retreat, Gary raised his pitchfork high, the fiery spirit of victory coursing through him. "I'll be waiting," he bellowed, the echo of his challenge reverberating across the fields. The bikers scrambled to their bikes, wild-eyed and confused, and sped off into the distance, leaving behind a swirling cloud of dust. Ben stood firmly, still gripping his pitchfork, breathing heavily but feeling a rush of triumph that he hadn't experienced in years. Days turned to weeks, and while Gary returned to tending his fields, the shadow of the motor gang loomed large over Green Hollow Farm. Each passing day brought fresh anxious thoughts. Were they truly finished, or would they return, emboldened by their first failure? But life continued, and the farm thrived under his care. He worked the fields, planting new seeds and nurturing the crops. Nonetheless, the laughter of his children was shadowed by the dark cloud of uncertainty. Then one night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, the familiar roar of engines returned. Gary's heart sank. He sprinted to his barn, adrenaline fueling every step. He grabbed more tools, a couple of sturdy ropes and a heavy hammer, trusting that if the gang was coming back, he would be ready this time. This time, they rolled into sight in full force, a menacing wave of leather and chrome approaching his property. Panic surged within him, but he steadied himself, remembering the fight he had won just weeks earlier. Rex dismounted with a crew that was twice the size of the last, his eyes filled with fury. He shouted, "You think you can keep us from what we want?" Gary stepped out from the shadows of the barn, swinging a hammer gently in his hand, eyeing the approaching gangmen. "You'll never take this farm. Not while I'm still standing," he called back, standing as tall and proud as the oak trees lining his fields. Rex yelled, and the gang surged forward, a chaotic flood of anger. Gary shouted, timing the onslaught perfectly. He dropped the hammer and charged toward the gang, flicking the ropes expertly around the first biker's legs, sending him tumbling to the ground. Rex screamed, his bravado cracking as he fought to regain control, but Gary kept pushing. He swung the pitchfork low, striking one biker after another, each movement fueled by a surge of adrenaline and fury. The fight was brutal, but it felt like a fight for survival. Every hit, every roar of defiance reminded Gary of everything he was protecting: the land, the memories, the very essence of who he was. Shouted Rex, trying to pull his gang together, but with each blow Gary landed, the unity began to falter. Bikers were growing weary, and they exchanged concerned glances as they started to reconsider. Feeling the tide shift once more, Gary took a breath, channeling every ounce of strength. "You want this farm." With every blow, Gary felt a surge of resolve. He dodged a swing from Rex and retaliated with swift precision, landing a blow that sent Rex staggering backward, his confidence crumbling. Rex shouted, voice rising in panic, and just like that, the gang broke ranks, abandoning their leader. The engines roared to life, and in a flurry of confusion, the bikers fled, leaving Rex behind to face the consequences of underestimating the farmer once more. Breathless and bathed in sweat, Gary stood amidst the aftermath, watching them disappear into the horizon. The adrenaline slowly ebbed away, leaving a sense of calm settling over him. With each breath, he felt pride wash over him. He had stood firm against the storm, defended his legacy, and driven the motor gang away yet again. As day turned into night, Gary took a moment to reflect on the battles fought and the victories won. His heart was lighter, filled with gratitude for every sunrise, every seed sown, every breath taken on his land. The struggles had only fortified his spirit. He had emerged not only as a farmer, but as a protector, a man willing to fight for what was rightfully his. With that thought resonating in his heart, Ben Thompson returned to his garden. He would continue to plant, to nurture, and to fight, not just for the land, but for every memory and dream that flowed through the soil of Green Hollow Farm. He knew then that he was ready for whatever storms may come next, a steadfast guardian of all he held dear. The sun was sinking low over the fields of Maple Grove Farm, casting long shadows across the golden corn stalks that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Everything felt serene, like a scene from a painting, until the distant rumble of motorcycle engines broke the calm like thunder rolling through a once peaceful sky. In the heart of the farm, rugged yet humble, stood Frank Dawson, his hands caked with dirt, sweat trickling down his brow. He paused, the sound of the approaching bikes penetrating his thoughts. For years he had toiled on this land, learning the rhythms of nature, knowing every inch of the soil beneath his feet. But as the engines roared nearer, unease settled over him like a heavy blanket. Then he saw them, 3 black motorcycles kicking up dust as they barreled down the dirt road toward his gate. The notorious Iron Riders Motor Gang. Whispers of their reputation had reached his ears. Bullies on bikes, swiping land from unsuspecting farmers, leaving chaos in their wake. A lump formed in his throat. They didn't just threaten his life's work, they threatened everything he had built. The gang pulled to a halt just outside the fence, engines growling in defiance. The leader, a massive man with a scar running down his cheek and a skull tattoo emblazoned on his arm, dismounted with a swagger that screamed arrogance. This was Rex, and from the look in his eyes, he was here to lay claim. "Nice little patch of dirt you have here," Rex shouted, his voice oozing condescension. "You know, it'd look better under our control." Frank's heart raced, but he dug deep, recalling the long hours spent planting seeds and harvesting crops. "This is my home," he retorted, voice firm with conviction. The gang erupted in laughter, a harsh and mocking sound that sliced through Frank's resolve. "Oh, we can, and we will," Rex sneered. "You think you can stand in our way?" He gestured to his gang, who circled around like vultures. But Frank wasn't just a farmer, he was a fighter, shaped by the resilience of the land he loved. Images of his grandfather battling to keep this property alive during the Great Depression surged in his mind. He lifted his chin defiantly. "You think I'm scared of you?" With that final word, a switch flipped inside him. It was time to act. He turned and sprinted toward the barn, adrenaline surging through his veins. Inside, the old wooden structure was filled with the scent of hay and the remnants of hard work. He needed weapons. Quickly scanning the shelves, he grabbed a pitchfork, its tines glinting in the fading light. Next, he hefted an old metal shovel, sturdy and reliable. Let's see what they really want, he thought, determination flooding back into his body. As he stepped outside, he squared his shoulders, the pitchfork gripped tightly in hand. Rex stood at the forefront of the gang, glaring, his smirk fading as Frank emerged. He taunted, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. "I'm not just fighting for this farm," Frank said, voice steady. "I'm fighting for my family, my history." With a sudden roar, Rex charged forward, fists raised, but Frank was ready. He sidestepped just in time, thrusting the pitchfork forward. It caught Rex's jacket, causing him to stumble backward. The gang hesitated, caught off guard by Frank's fierce resolve. Rex bellowed, anger flaring in his eyes, but others in the gang shifted uneasily, glancing at one another as Frank lunged again, swinging the shovel like a sword. Time seemed to slow as Frank fought back, adrenaline pushing him forward. He struck one gang member and then another, creating a distance between himself and the looming threat. Each hit was fueled by love for his land and the memories of hard work that had shaped him. Frank roared, the sound reverberating through the fields, awakening something in the hearts of the gang. Doubts began to seep in like the very soil he worked. One biker hesitated, then whispered to another, "This isn't worth it, man." Rex, noticing the shift, tried to rally his crew, but it was slipping away. One by one, the gang began to back off, fear etched on their faces. Frank pressed forward, sensing victory within grasp. "How about we settle this the easy way? You ride out now and I won't call the police," Frank shouted, his voice booming with authority. "You think you're tough?" The fear in the gang members' faces deepened, and without further hesitation, they turned their bikes around. Rex was left standing there, fists clenched in frustration. He spat, but it was too late. The gang roared away, leaving a cloud of dust lingering in their wake. Breathless and victorious, Frank stood among the remnants of chaos, heart racing with triumph. His mind swirled with disbelief at what he had just accomplished. But even as he celebrated, the anxiety slinked in this was just a battle, not the war. Days turned into weeks as Frank resumed his chores, continuously glancing down the dirt road, waiting for the gang's inevitable return. The sun rose and set, tirelessly illuminating the fields he loved, yet a sense of dread followed him like a shadow. Then, one fateful evening, as the sky darkened into a tapestry of deep blues and purples, that familiar roar returned. Frank's stomach tightened as he peered out towards the horizon, the same 3 bikes emerging, accompanied by reinforcements. This time they were not joking or laughing. Rex had returned, angrier and more determined than ever, flanked by a dozen gang members. "You had your fun, but now it's time to teach you a real lesson," he growled. Frank's heart pounded as he raced to the barn, grabbing more tools, a couple of heavy chains and a tire iron. He felt the weight of the threat grow heavier with each passing second. The gang revved their engines, encircling him as Rex stepped forward, a vengeful glint in his eye. Frank could see the aggression in their stance, the confidence he had shattered now replaced by a desperate fury. He raised the tire iron, surveying the approaching gang. "If you want to fight, you'll get it." The moment exploded into action as Rex charged, swinging wildly. Frank ducked and dodged, keeping his focus sharp. He swung the tire iron at Rex, connecting with a solid thud that sent the gang leader staggering back. Frank shouted, adrenaline pumping as he engaged the next biker, fending him off with the pitchfork. The barn, once a sanctuary, felt alive with chaos. While the gang had numbers, Frank had something more. He fought for every single memory, every inch of land that meant the world to him. The fight surged back and forth, each clash echoing like a battle cry until he discovered an undeniable rhythm. But amid the heat of the battle, Frank felt the gang beginning to close in on him again. He swung wildly, managing to fend off a couple of gang members, but the numbers were too great. The weight of their advances began to press down on him. He saw Rex charge forward again, this time with a more cohesive plan of attack. Rex shouted, rallying his crew. The determination surged back into the gang as they all lunged forward. Anxiety coiled in Frank's gut as he fought back, dodging and weaving, but despair threatened to take hold. One of the bikers managed to grab the pitchfork, wrenching it from Frank's grip. In that moment of panic, Frank spun around and swung the tire iron, knocking the biker aside. But the chaos grew, their numbers were overwhelming. Frank ducked and dodged, feeling the pressure mount. He told himself, desperation fueling every motion and swing. Just as he knocked another biker away, Rex caught him from the side, sending him crashing to the ground. Breathless, Frank found himself looking up at the night sky, stars glimmering above him, a taunting reminder of what he was fighting for. He realized in that fleeting moment this was bigger than just him. This was a battle for the very spirit of what farming represented: resilience, dedication, and the fight for a better tomorrow. From his position on the ground, he quickly sprang up, determined not to let despair take residence. He reached for a nearby heavy chain, swinging it like a whip, catching the nearest biker across the legs, sending him tumbling. But the gang's onslaught continued, relentless and insatiable. Just then, as the battle raged on and hope seemed to wane, something in the distance caught Frank's eye, a glimmer of light. It wasn't another bike, it was the headlights of a car approaching, cutting through the darkness. Would it be a neighbor? Help! More uncertainty coursed through him as he fought on, knowing he couldn't falter now. The light drew closer, illuminating the chaotic scene, a flicker of salvation against the tide of turmoil. Rex saw the car, a flash of panic breaking through his tough demeanor. "We need to go," he yelled, insecurity creeping into his voice for the first time. But the fight wasn't over. Frank, fueled by newfound energy, pressed forward, sticking to his gut instinct. He would not give in, he could not let fear win. "You want my farm?" he shouted, the words resonating powerfully, echoing across the fields. As tension hung thick in the air, the headlights became a blazing beacon, illuminating the battle and capturing the attention of the bikers. Frank took advantage of the distraction, summoning every ounce of courage as he lunged at Rex once more. A powerful flurry of strikes aimed to send a clear message. He yelled, and just as he moved in for the final blow, the car's headlights flooded the area, catching the gang completely off guard. Everything slowed. The lights reached their zenith, casting an unearthly glow over the chaos. Frank faced Rex, ready for the end, but in that moment the world zoomed in and sharpened, everything else dissolved away. Then the sound of the engine revved louder and out stepped a familiar figure, silhouetted against the bright lights. Tessa, his daughter, emerged from the car, eyes wide with determination. "Dad," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. In that instant, Frank felt a strange mix of hope and danger. The gang hesitated, looking between him and the new threat. Frank saw a chance; he could still turn the tide. Everything exploded into action once more as Tessa rushed to her father's side. She urged, grabbing a stray garden tool from the barn. With renewed strength, they stood back to back, ready to face the gang together. Frank's eyes filled with pride. He would protect his family with everything he had. But just as they prepared to act, Rex growled, motioning for his gang to escape. "This isn't over," he cried, retreating as the sound of engines roared to life. "Then we'll be ready," Frank shouted back, heart pounding as he watched the gang speed away into the dark night, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Standing together, father and daughter, they watched as the dust settled. Frank knew the battle wasn't truly over. They had survived this encounter, but the war for their land was far from finished. Tessa asked, breathless but unyielding. Frank nodded, realizing that while the fight had been fierce, it was just the beginning of a struggle that would test their family's bond and challenge everything they believed in. As they turned back toward the farmhouse, shadows danced in the corners of Frank's mind. He caught a glimpse of what could lie ahead, a storm of challenges, a relentless fight for survival, and the unwavering promise to stand tall against the odds. And as the stars twinkled defiantly above them, Frank and Tessa stood united, ready to face whatever darkness the future held. The dawning challenge loomed, but together father and daughter there was no fear, only the thrill of the fight to come.